Have you ever found yourself after a game of D&D debating over a particular rule that came up and trying to figure out, as a group, how to break it? As a DM, do you get that feeling of dread when your player asks, if you look at it this way? Well, we decided to turn that into a podcast. A group of DMs come together every episode as we discuss how, rules as written, we can figure out how to maximize what we can do with a rule and how we can use other rules to break the game. Each episode, we will be joined by a guest, including DMs from some of our favorite podcasts, and get a sneak peek behind the DM screen from some of our favorite shows as they share their own thoughts and experiences on a particular rule and how it has affected their games. Please feel free to jump in on our discussions by leaving us a comment on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or feel free to email me at dm@dndraw.com, or send us a tweet to @rulesaswritten and let us know how the rule may have come up during one of your games, or how you figured out a way to break the game that we didn't discuss. So, thanks for joining us. Hey everyone, I'm Tony.
Hi, this is Bethany.
Hey, Rachel here.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm the host of the Loremasters podcast, a podcast full of DM inspiration each week.
Today we will be discussing player character deaths. Rob, thanks for joining us on this.
It's my pleasure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Loremasters?
Sure. So, overarchingly, I run a network called Kaiju FM, doing podcasts and things. And I'm a massive consumer of role-playing podcasts. I listen to a lot. But because I live in the wilds of Middle England, I don't have local friends to play with. So I couldn't really put together an actual play podcast. And I thought, well, what can I do? What can I do? I've been a dungeon master for about 15 years. And I thought, one thing I love about being a dungeon master is making stuff. So inventing peoples and places and objects and cults and, demon lords and magical swords and that sort of stuff. And I thought, well, that's something that people might be interested in doing and listen to. So I put together this show. So essentially it is each week. It's only about 5 minutes long. It's a very short show. But I write it up in advance. I script out a little bit of a story. So explaining a bit of the world in which you find this item or this person or this place. A little bit of sort of flavour intro to it. Then I kind of go into what I call the in-game history. So if we buy into the world, what was the history of the item, who made it, where it come from, who founded the city, what does the person look like, all that kind of stuff. And then I kind of end with some stats. So if you want to, these are all kind of pitched depending on what level your players are at. But obviously you can kind of take those stats and run with them and do things with them. Some of them it's as simple as, this is a cloak. It gives you advantage on stealth rolls. Some of them, like the one I released yesterday from recording. I'm not sure when it's going to go out.
The Broken Bone?
The Broken Bone.
I was just listening to that.
It's much more of this is a plot hook you can hang some stories off. So they are, spoilers alert, the Broken Bone are a cult of adventurers who are trying to kill the gods. And the idea being that if you're at lower levels, they are too huge for you to deal with. It's like fighting Cthulhu. You can't deal with them. You can just kind of interact with one-on-one with their adventurers. But the higher up you go, actually combating the cult becomes a viable campaign arc. And I ended it with the idea being if they're really high level, then you can have the Broken Bone succeed and kill all the gods. And what happens then? So the idea that they always end with a bit of more game tech, shall we say, crunch as it's called. The idea that the numbers and the ideas behind them. Say they're only about they range from about 3 minutes to about 5 minutes maximum, really. Okay. And yet weekly, it's just a challenge to keep me writing and keep my hand in with doing something in the gaming space that I love so much.
Awesome, that is really, really cool. I definitely. I gotta listen to a bunch of this and might use some of it.
Have few people say that they've used a few things, and that's like, I can't explain. It's the joy I feel when someone might use something I've made is deep in me that I love it very, very much.
It's great to see your creation go out into the world and integrate with other people's stories and be part of their narrative.
It's because it's just me making stuff up in a town in England. It's lovely when these things spread.
Yeah, to be fair, it's what we're all doing. We're all just making stuff up at our various locations.
Yeah, that's why I love it.
I didn't have this as a question, but I really want to know, Rob. How many PCs have you killed, by which I mean dead? Because I haven't killed anybody permanently.
Permanently.
I'm trying to think. Over all the games I've ran and played, I've probably killed, like, dead.
Yeah.
10?
Whoa.
10, 15 players?
Oof.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
probably,
impressive.
I can count 10 from thinking about it, and I'm sure there's been a couple more that I've forgotten.
The important ones are 10, so we'll say 10 to 12.
10, 12, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always had a lot of characters like knocked to, like, you know, they've been unconscious, making those clutch death saves, or they've died, but they've been brought back within, like, that window for Revivify. So I've never even had anybody be resurrected in my games because, well, it's mostly because Rachel's a really good player and she's their healer in my game. So she makes sure she stays alive so that she can bring people back. But
yes.
I did have the advantage that one of my big campaigns, I had 7 players and no healers. So that did play in my favour in terms of character deaths. A few people had healing word here and there, but there were no actual healers.
So when somebody died, they're like, well, this is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll get more to this maybe later, but I do have some methods for trying to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in that campaign, I did try and sprinkle in advance ways to avoid death, even when you were dead, so that they knew they had options if they wanted to take them.
So, what sort of mechanisms did you use?
So, and a lot of my players will recognise this. What I tend to do early on is, if they are exploring a dungeon, I will throw them a big, sealed, really scary, lots of bars, do not enter door. If they get through that door, behind which they will find a chained up and sort of bound and tortured Celestial. Either or Celestial or Fiend, one or the other, depending on how the characters are playing it. And if they choose to release that person, the person like, I mean, you're dead. I will repay your debt. And then they disappear. And then down the line, when the first person dies, or the right person dies, I can call upon that in their history. Actually, you go to a bright shining place. The Celestial you saw earlier is there. They offer you the chance to return if you want it, to settle their debt.
Okay.
So that way, even if they are, deepest, darker dungeons, no access to a healer, no access to sort of any kind of spells, there are some mechanisms for them to maybe avoid death if they want to. Some of them don't. Some of them are keen to roll up new characters. Some of them want to save that for, a different character, that kind of thing. But I often try and find a way to throw in an early get out of jail free card.
So would you treat that like a resurrection spell where, they pretty much have just died, they're being brought back? Would they have any penalties, or would they just come back exactly as they were but healed?
With that it depends on the campaign, the players. If I throw them a Fiend character rather than a Celestial, then most likely there's some penalties. There's some sort of deal or some debt in there they have to deal with. If it's a sort of an angelic character who's kind of on that side of the coin, it tends to be kind of coming back without penalties.
Okay.
But that makes sense.
I will only do this in the first probably 3 to 4 levels. I think once you hit level 5, you've got to take up the chin that if you die, you've probably made a mistake to get dead.
Yes. Yeah, I had that same talk with my players when they hit level 5. I mean, unless you have like a healer who has Revivify, like the threat of death is much scarier. I think if you have someone that is going to be there with you in combat who is hardy, like Rachel plays a paladin, like death is a lot. I don't know. It's still possible, but it's really only a fear if multiple people are dying. So as long as only one person's dying, they're like, it's fine. She'll get there with the Revivify and it'll all be okay. It's when you're like, oh my gosh, we're all dying, that I think that's where the panic sets in. I've never had a TPK, but I've had a couple times where I thought, oh shoot, it's happening.
It got close.
Like, it's about to happen.
This is the moment I've terrified forever.
So
I had a TPK in the first session of New Campaign once.
Oh.
I only had 3 players, and it was a rogue, a bard, and a fighter. And the rogue and the bard players decided to run into melee combat rather than doing their range abilities. They thought they'd go and toe-to-toe with a group of bandits, and they lost. And at that point, it was 1 fighter versus 4 bandits. And he went down as well. And he had no way to heal the other 2. The only person who had any kind of healing abilities was the bard, and he went down first. And I kind of felt like, all 3 of you are dead. You're dead.
You're quite dead. You're dead.
And I did feel bad for players. I'm like, actually, we're an hour into the first session, and you've got to roll up your characters now.
So you stuck by it. You're like, it happened. We're gonna live with the consequences and move forward.
I think, running the different campaigns, I always think it's important to have that session 0 chat with your players and say like what the terms are.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to that campaign we're going very not real because none of it's real, but we're going very kind of strict. And so if you're dead, you're dead.
Yep.
And I'm not going to let you roll up, the same character with a different name. I do have a rule across all my campaigns. If you die, you can't play the same class or the same race again. And if we're moving from one campaign to another, the same thing applies. Otherwise, you get certain players who will always roll up Dragonborn fighters, or they'll always roll up elvish rogues. So I always have that rule. If you die, you don't come back as the same kind of character.
So here's something I think is kind of interesting that sort of connects to that. I know for my campaigns, people have talked about dying. They usually have their Plan B character, which is a totally different race and class usually, because if they die, they kind of see, in a sense, that character build failed. Not all players, but some players. So they kind of see death almost as like, I lost the game, and I think that's kind of something that I think is a little bit of a struggle with the way the rules work for D&D 5e, where it's, I think death can be an important part of the narrative, but it doesn't always feel that way. It kind of feels like, well, I lost, and now I have to
fix it.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's anything in the rules that really helps kind of push that part of it, where death it's a natural part of life. I mean, you're an adventurer, you live a high risk lifestyle, people are probably going to die, and that's okay. Instead it feels like, either I died because I screwed up or because my party didn't support me, or that sort of thing.
Often I find it depends on how the death happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said there, I think sometimes I've had characters die because their healer wasn't paying attention or was off doing something else, or they the players got chatting about something else, and I'm like, he's dying in the corner, and none of you are doing anything. And I think sometimes with that, people are a bit like, well, there's no reason. In the world of D&D, there was no reason for my character to die there beyond the players rather than the characters. I think that might be hard to take on the chin sometimes.
Yeah, when it's just a mistake. It was a bad choice as a player, and you're like, it was just bad strategy or tactics or inattention. Which totally happens. Yeah, I think that's when it's awkward. Yeah. When it's something that feels like it's been built up to, like, I said I haven't had any characters permanently die, but I've always assumed it was going to be Tony's character, and I'm ready for it.
I was confident my character was going to die. My character is like a super aggressive fighter.
He's probably still going to die. Well, he's very, self-sacrificing, no, you all ready to escape. I will stay and fight the final thing.
It's like, if it seems like our group is going to die, my character would hang back to hold them off while everyone else runs away.
Very, very, cheesy sort of thing, but that's who he is. So I think that kind of death, if it happens for Tony's character, we'll all be like, oh, he was a great character, it's sad, but it'll feel right.
Yeah.
And then I will make a new one.
I think when I've played, I've always tried to make sure that if they're gonna die gloriously.
Yeah.
I say level 1 to 3, you can get wiped out by anything.
Well,
but once you hit higher levels, with your character there, you want him to die. If he's gonna die, you want it to be. They want them to sing songs about it. You want them to tell tales about it. And I think that's something you want to shoot for. I think as a DM, I try and accept that character death is part of the game. Mm-hmm. And I always try and tell my players, death can happen. And I'll do my best to make sure it's glorious, and you will go out in a hail of arrows saving the rest of your party, or make it a good death. I think that is an easier way to sell it to your players. You think, well, if they're here to tell a story rather than just win a game, well, sometimes dying's part of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. I think the struggle as a DM is that the rules don't really lend themselves towards that. I know you can make it work, but it requires a lot of planning, a bit of luck, and really good knowledge of the rules for how death works, because characters could just instantly die if they have low HP and they go against that big bad, which just whacks them in a single hit, and they're just dead.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, have you ever had an incident where they hit the negative max HP?
I've had it twice.
Oof.
And both times was from falling.
Yeah.
Because falling damage is one of those things, if you're 20 stories up in a wizard's tower and you fall out the window, Almost like if you're playing by the rules, the mechanics take over there, and you're going to take X damage from that fall.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I like, there's nothing, I can't, make them miss. I can't fudge the rolls,
it's just happening.
Of the bad guy. I can't make him, I can't suddenly throw a distraction in the fight to make the bad guy leave you alone. If you fall off a building, you're going to take falling damage. And
Yep.
Don't do that, guys, because falling damage is in the game is what it is.
Yeah. That's literally the first episode of our podcast because it came up because it's...
My character died from falling damage.
Well, because I think as a DM, I tried to prepare the players like falling is super lethal if you're not at your max HP and you're not like just a super hardy character. Tony's character survived because he died and was revivified in time. But, there's some situations where you can just die if you make the wrong choice or you're very unlucky and it just happens.
That's something I always try and bring in, that if I'm in a situation where there is something in the room, lava, a big falling death, that can insta-kill in that respect, I will try and telegraph it a little bit to my players. So, one example, it didn't work because of the player, but when they were fighting on top of the tower, I had one of the minions and the other guys miss a hit and fall off the edge. And I described you seeing his body, plummet down through and slam into the floor. Lifeless on the floor. And so having an insta-kill of a bad guy or an NPC, I try, it doesn't always work, to go, actually, you know what, like, kind of seed with my character, like, this will kill you.
I do like the idea of giving indications of what something means, especially when it's environmental, I think, like what you were saying, where they might not realize, oh, even though I'm a high-powered adventurer, I'm not invincible.
No.
Yeah, the indication of something being, like, immensely dangerous to the party. I like that a lot.
I learned the lesson early on. One of my very first character deaths was we were exploring a very old dungeon, and they came across, which they didn't know it was, an annihilation sphere.
Oh.
And I think he was the paladin, or the warlock, decided to stick his hand in it and see what it was.
It's the only way you'll know.
And so after that, I'm like, okay, like, I see why he had no clue what it was, and I hadn't telegraphed that it was really dangerous. So that was when I learned, actually, you know what, if I'm throwing something random at them that might really hurt them, I will try and find some way to telegraph it. Because I tend to run more, I suppose, exploration games rather than combat games. I'm a big fan of exploration games. So I hand out XP for being inquisitive, for being, willing to kick down that door. If I want to do that with my players, I've got to also highlight when they probably shouldn't kick down that door.
When there might be something just a little off about that door. They might want to take a moment.
Come back to that one in a few levels' time.
Might want to do a few investigation checks on that door.
Yes.
It's like, this feels really, really cold, but it's hot out.
Yeah. So we talked about kind of instantly dying, when you just hit that max HP or, negative max HP and you just die. I think one of the other things that's interesting is falling unconscious, which is, I think, a bit of a struggle for new players or people who have played in previous systems because it's so different in 5th edition. I like it overall because it's pretty straightforward. Like, there's only so many outcomes of it. There's only so many ways to deal with it. And you pretty much know what they all are when they're happening. The problem, I think, is maybe some players, especially new players, don't realize how vulnerable you are when you're unconscious. Like, well, I'm not necessarily dying. I'm just sort of laying there.
Yeah.
But you're extremely vulnerable to, like, attacks.
Any damage you take is a failed death save. Even from AoE.
Yeah. So I think, in Tony's campaign, the Eye of the Abyss one he's talked about, I played primarily like a damage dealer, run in, stab things, run out. I learned very early on in the game that if my character got knocked unconscious, it pretty much meant I was going to die because it would only happen if I stayed in melee, and then I would be dying and would just get, hit twice by multi-attack monsters and just outright die. It got pretty close a couple times, but after that I learned, okay, I just have to make sure I never get anywhere near being knocked unconscious, because for some other, types of classes, it's okay if I don't know. It's not as much of a risk. It also depends on if you are the healer, right, Rachel?
Yeah, when I get close to being low on hit points, mind you, I think I've only been knocked unconscious like once in our game.
Once, yeah.
But when I get close, I panic. I'm like, I'm going down, and the rest of the party's gonna die because nobody else can heal.
Yeah.
Nope, you're the healer.
She's the paladin,
and she potions and stuff, but
but you also have a ton of hit points. So if something has worn down, what is it? How many hit points do you have now? Like 300?
No, 130 something.
It's a lot.
It's 144.
That's a fair amount.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm hefty.
But yeah, I think I've had to remind some of the players when they are knocked unconscious, and just sort of remind everyone, like, okay, just as a reminder, this is what being knocked unconscious means. This is what you're vulnerable to. Don't assume they're just going to quietly wait it out.
Well, part of the thing too is if someone hits you in melee range unconscious, it's an auto crit, which is 2 failed saves. But if that crit exceeds your negative maximum, you still die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, as we're talking about sort of rules written, the one thing that my players come up against is that their metagaming assumption that the bad guys are going to stop when you're unconscious.
Oh. Yep. Yeah.
Now, I grant you, if it's a bandit or it's a humanoid thing character, then they probably will. But if you're fighting wolves,
nope,
they're not going to stop when you're unconscious. And I've had a few players die because they're like, "Oh, well, he's dead. No, that character's down. Fair enough. We'll leave them down. We'll come back in a minute and we'll deal with everything else.
They'll be fine."
Yeah,
they're still being eaten by wolves.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I think sometimes players can metagame and think, "Well, no, now I'm down. At least I'm out."
Yeah, they're like, Rob wouldn't kill me with these little creatures.
No, he won't kill me.
But yeah, I think maybe it's because I haven't permanently killed a player character that I'm like a little shy of like permanently killing somebody without. Well, I'm okay if it happens within the game. I'm always afraid of doing it where there was no opportunity to intervene.
Yeah, I think as I said earlier, I think it's probably a case of you got to feel like the death was earned, or that it was part of the story. That a random death out of nowhere doesn't serve the story or the player or anybody really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's definitely a struggle, I think, to make
killing
death
players.
to make the death feel feel good, but feel appropriate and not just
So, like, my worst one, Bethany, you would know.
Yes, it's on the list.
Is when she walked into a room, and so this was back in 3.5, where you had to roll the crit and then confirm the crit, and I made these little mining orcs that their whole thing was that they had a negative, 4 or 5 to hit. So I was like, I'm never going to hit. But if I do, they're really strong because they just mine all day. So they'll do a lot of damage. I didn't expect to crit on the squishy little sorcerer with 4 hit points.
4 hit points. It was like session 2 or something, and I hadn't played D&D, and I was like, okay, I'm going to walk into the room. And then...
Yeah, and I crit and did 16 points of damage or some ridiculous amount. I was like...
You hit the negative 10 easily.
Oh, easy. And I was well... You don't even exist, in their memories anymore. You are so dead.
And I was like...
I am so very sorry.
I was like, I didn't know that could happen.
I was like,
can I do something? Can I do something with my familiar? Because I had this little, half ferret, half weasel, familiar because I was a sorcerer. And I was like, is there anything I could have done if I'd known this was going to be super murdery? I was so upset. I was very upset.
Yeah.
I have ended this friendship. I'm so sorry.
No, it's just because it came out of nowhere for both of us, and also I did not realize how terrible my character was because it was my first character and it was 3.5. So I thought I was okay, and I was not. I was a squishy, high-end sorcerer with 4 HP.
I will say some players hang on to the character deaths far more than the DMs do. I have a couple that were mentioned earlier with the bandits where they all died in the TPK.
Yeah.
At least 2 of them bring it up every session with me.
Oh.
Like, just in case Rob killed us all today. He kills all of us. And I'm like, we just started a new campaign about a month ago with those guys, and through the entire first week, careful, Rob might kill us all here.
So they think you're
several years ago, guys, and it's your fault.
Apparently not. It's your fault because you killed them.
Yep, it's all you.
It's all my fault.
Maybe that's why I'm a softie. It's because I'm scared of my players. That probably is the real reason.
They will hold it over you. I mean, that is one thing as a DM, you have to take on the chin that obviously you're killing players, but the players will be pissed at you.
Yeah.
They will remember.
Yeah.
Even when it's their fault, they will remember and blame you for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay, I'm looking back at rules because, oh my gosh, we've gotten off topic, but that's okay. It's on topic. It's just off rules.
Gone around the topic.
Okay. Yeah, somebody was good. So we've talked a bit about death saves, and I enjoy seeing players make death saves. It's exciting. It's pretty much the most exciting roll you can make. And that's more than any other time where you're like, I need that nat 20 and definitely not that natural one.
Yep.
Come on. There's a lot of I don't know, prayers to deities, real and fictional, cradling of the dice.
It always surprises me how often death saving throws go to the last dice.
Yes. Yeah, same here. I think we don't see a lot of nat 20s that ones, but I guess statistically, like, you're slightly more likely to succeed than fail. But even then, we get down to that third roll where they're like, if this roll doesn't happen and no one comes and like stabilizes me or heals me, like, I could be dead, guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do enjoy those moments as a DM because also I have no control over those moments. They're just happening. It's just part of the story. It's part of the experience for the players, and you're just watching to see what happens.
Yep.
I mean, I don't watch sports. I assume it's something like that, where you're like, anything could happen right now. It's all down to the wire.
One interesting thing that came up against recently in one of my games about death saving throws is my bard arguing that he could give bardic inspiration to them.
Oh.
Now, by the rules, you can't, because when someone's unconscious, they are unaware of their surroundings and thus can't hear the music that the bard's playing.
Right, they can't receive the inspiration.
But it's one I've seen ruled both ways in different games that I've seen. The idea of giving bonuses and giving the people who are dying advantage and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, well, in that case, I'm not a nice DM. I'm like, it's just a roll, guys. It's just a die.
That's all you
get. It's
get.
just that one d20. It's just you and that d20. Seeing where the future
I would give it. I wouldn't give Bard inspiration to that. Just because, like you said, they're unconscious, they're unaware. Unless the Bard is physically over there, like, massaging them, in which case they could do a medicine check.
Yeah, they should be stabilizing them.
Well, here's my question, though. What if the Bard already gave them an inspiration die to use earlier?
They're unconscious.
They're still unconscious.
See, I come down on the view of that you aren't rolling any of your skills here.
Yeah.
You are rolling a chance dice. It isn't a case of your fighter's stronger, so he has a better chance. Like, it isn't about your character at that point. So nothing you have, unless you have an ability that gives you something with death saving throws, nothing that will give you checks, advantage, and all that stuff matters here.
Well, yeah,
because you're not rolling a skill set, you're rolling a chance.
Right, because as the rules say, you are in the hands of fate now.
Yep.
You as a person have no control. There's no, like, someone slapping you across the face and saying, stay with me, or anything like that will help you not die. It's just not how it works. And I think I like it that way.
I agree, but I have seen people sort of almost treat it as a ability check or as a check, as it were. And so there are mechanisms to give it advantage or give it bonuses. But I try and push back on it and think, you're rolling, it's about that chance. It's not about a skill check.
And I think most of them say, there are some that say except for death saving throws. I know there are, I just don't remember off the top of my head.
There are certain ones, so it does kind of partially imply that certain things can be used to boost a death save, but by the way, I don't disagree at all. I would just have them roll a d20. I was just bringing it up as devil's advocate here.
It's a good question. I think it shows a bit about everyone's DM style, like how much of a hardliner are you when it comes to characters dying? And I'm like, well, once it comes to death saves, I mean, the good thing is, if you are the only one who is dying, you're unconscious or you're making death saves as a player character, and the rest of your party is fine, part of what's happening is not just you being in the hands of fate, but you relying on your party to take care of you, to realize that you need help, and even if you don't have a healer, to come over and stabilize you and, to try to make that medicine check, because it's really not a hard medicine check to make. No. They just need to use their action to get to you and do it. And it's only a DC 10, so even if you don't have medicine, you still have a decent chance of making it happen.
Yeah.
So I agree, and one of the reasons why I do like going to death saving throws is that it's one of the few things in the game that doesn't scale with levels.
Yes, yeah.
So falling damage, a level 1 will kill you from Ghost Stories, but the bigger you get, you've got 130 hit points. That's a lot of falling damage you can take.
Yeah.
Whereas death saving throws they're the same if you're level 1 or level 20.
Yep.
And I like that. I must say I like that game.
I like that a lot because it's basically like the whole point of all these hit points is just means that it's harder to bring you down. But once you're down, you're just as vulnerable as anybody else.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think something I was realizing, as I was looking at the rules, I was trying to remember if we've ever had anyone actually just come back, slowly regain consciousness from making their successful death saves. And I don't think that really happens in our
one shot. That's the only time.
Yeah, the one shot. Otherwise, pretty much they either don't make them and die, and then get revivified, or someone comes and stabilizes them, or an ARC game
dumps
a healing potion.
Yep.
Yeah, we had to house rule how it works to feed someone a healing potion because that's a pretty common thing, I think, in ARC games. They're like, well, what does it take? I'm like, well, I'm going to say it's an action because you have to take your healing potion and then get it into that other person's, mouth.
Well, I believe that usually it's just an action to take a healing potion, but we kind of house rule that's a bonus action to take one, an action to feed one.
Yes.
To someone else.
Because you know where your mouth is.
It just makes sense to me.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess overall, I do like how dying works in 5e because it's overall pretty simple and easy to follow.
Yeah.
But there are some ways I definitely relied on as a player character to avoid dying, like Death Ward.
Preventative measures.
Yeah, like in Tony's game, we had a couple of NPC healers, like one who was like a full cleric and one who was like a priest, and I was like, okay, so we're gonna make sure we have mutual, a death ward's established, so both of our healers have death ward, so we've got some leeway there. That was like going into like the final fight with Demogorgon, so I was like, okay, they've got some backup. I have known some players who want to just keep Death Ward on themselves, like as a regular thing. Like I wake up in the morning and put on my Death Ward,
It's an 8-hour non-concentration spell. I mean, I get that. It makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't prevent you from dying. It just means you get an out that first time you would have dropped to 0.
Yep.
Or if it's an insta-kill, like Power Word Kill.
That's true.
Which that spell is so nasty, but it makes sense. It's 9th level.
Yeah.
But have you used Death Ward at all in your games, Rob?
I have used it. I mean, I've had characters use it. I have had characters use it to a bit more. How to describe it? Innovatively, they use it as kind of like a protection suit to do things they shouldn't do normally, like wade through lava, or jump off buildings. Obviously, if you hit 0, you bounce back up to 1. You could jump off a higher height than you normally could, because you know you're going to survive it. Now, I think at the end discretion, there's obviously insta kill as a sort of a risk to run there. But I have had a few of them use it for things like that, where you you go swimming longer than you can, knowing that you will die, but it will bring you back.
It'll hold you at that 1.
Of course, if you're still in the situation that is killing you.
Yep.
Very vulnerable.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's a risky move, but I think people use it as kind of like a protection suit kind of thing, like a radiation suit, to kind of keep them back. And they hit 0, they bounce back to 1, and then they port out of there or get pulled out of there. But it's a way to kind of risk going in somewhere and reaching 0 hit points.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, or at least I don't think I've had the right opportunity as a player to use it that way. But it does seem interesting to kind of use it as your get out of jail free card that one time.
Because the barbarians have a similar thing as part of their class feats.
Yes. That's a higher level thing where it's a con save and it increases every time, but they can stop themselves from going to 0.
And I've seen my players use that. They've faked a bar fight and faked killing somebody. And they will actually kill him, but it'll bounce back to 1. And use it in sort of interesting ways like that. So
relentless rage. That's what it's called.
Yes. So I have seen people kind of use that ability to die and come back in non-combat encounters. You see what I'm saying? And I always enjoy that. I always enjoy seeing my players use things in ways like, well, that isn't quite what it's designed for, but the rules let you do it. So yes.
Yep.
I think I always get accused of being a mean DM, but I love this. I love when my players are smarter than me. And I put a thing in front of them, and they're like, "Oh, actually, you can do this." I'm like, "Yes, you can." I didn't think about that. Brilliant.
Ha ha ha!
I love those. I love those moments because that happens near the end of the Orenthal campaign where Bethany used an ability that I'm like, I wasn't expecting you to use this in this way, rather than just use it during the fight like you normally would. But okay, this will work.
So, real quick too, half-orcs also have. I couldn't remember what it was called, but the Relentless Endurance, which is the same thing.
Yeah, if they drop to 0, they drop to 1 for the first time that this would happen in a long rest.
Yep. I knew there was another way to do it, because I was like, Chris had it like twice. But I couldn't remember how. It was because he was a half-orc barbarian.
Oh yeah, that also happened in Orenthal with the half-orc NPC monk who got shot point blank with a crossbow bolt.
Killing NPCs is always fun.
It was close.
That's why people think you're an evil DM.
Yeah, probably true. Probably true.
But I was looking at spells for killing, and I added spells for killing. That's all spells, pretty much.
Spells for all the killing.
Spells for
Pretty
killing
much
and
everything's
living.
for killing.
But to some extent, yeah, it's either directly or indirectly for killing. More often,
Distract them so we can kill.
Yeah, murder homo. Obviously, we did talk a little bit about power word kill, and I know that has come up, and it's always challenging when it's a DM. You are asking a player, "How many hit points do you have right now?" And they go, "Why?" Like, just...
Because less than 100, no save, you just die.
Yeah. I mean, if you have 100, then nothing. So, it just...
Well, actually, if you have 101.
101. That's true.
Because it's 100 or less.
100 or fewer, yeah. And it's come up a few times where it's been, like, on the cusp, but as DM, I don't track players' HP. I trust them to track their HP.
I agree, yep.
And it... Partly because it's easier that way, but also because it makes it more exciting in those moments where I don't know exactly where their HP is because my monsters don't know where their HP is. You know, my evil necromancer doesn't know. But I think that's exciting. And kind of related to that, Finger of Death.
Oh, that's a nasty
This definitely came up in my game because I kind of did this side adventure in Waterdeep because we got tired of Prince of the Apocalypse. They were like, and now for something completely different to Waterdeep. We're going to go and, I don't know, solve some sort of plot with the Xanathar, which was, I thought, really fun. One of my favorite parts of the campaign. But they ended up trying to go and take on this, it was like an anathema lich I created. So it was like a combination of lich stats and an anathema. It was a horrible, horrible thing. And Chris's character, I feel poor Chris, he plays the monk, so his job is to run up there, do his monk things, punching, kicking, stunning, etc., and then move away. And he has the alert feat, so he's almost always first. And he was first in this fight and decided to run up to the main, anathema lich, punch him a lot, and then stay there. And it was one of those times I did not telegraph specifically how murderous this was going to be. I thought it was pretty clear when they knew going in that they were going to, like, fight a representative of Merkul, the god of death, that sort of thing. And, he died because of Finger of Death. And, I mean, it's a con save, and he was a monk, so it wasn't his strong suit. And he was like, well, how was I supposed to know? I just run in and die? And I was like, well, to be fair, you totally provoked him, and you were standing right there, and he's super evil, and let's just see what happens about, what happens after this round. Hopefully someone will come and, help you. So otherwise, I don't think I've seen a successful Finger of Death. We've had some really intense counter spells of Finger of Death a few times, and those are exciting when you have some sense that it's happening, and you're like, use the counter spell now!
Yep. It's like, they raise a hand and point one finger towards you. Use it.
But, yeah. So the other spell I have on here was something Tony mentioned that is new from Xanathar's Guide, the Soul Cage.
Yep. I mentioned it just because it's an interesting spell. Use a reaction to snatch the soul of a humanoid as it dies and traps it inside a tiny cage you use for the material component. Now, it remains inside the cage for 8 hours or until you release it. And it allows you to exploit the soul for different powers. But while this soul is in this cage, the dead humanoid cannot be revived.
So that's kind of intense. Like, that puts you in a not so great place. I think story-wise, it would be an amazing story element to use that against players.
I think I must say I've not read that, so this is a new one to me for this podcast, but I really like that because I think it's wonderfully a plot hook as much as it is a spell.
Exactly. Yeah.
Someone dies, your guy try to revive him. You can't at all, even though you should be able to, and then that sends you on the mission to get back. You've got 8 hours in which to try and get back their soul. It kind of extends that whole death saving period to like everyone else on this rushed mission to try and save this soul. Not like that.
Yeah, and it also makes Revivify useless.
Which is, I think, something that could be valuable. And I'm not saying I'm going to use this spell, but I think it's a great spell when a party relies heavily on Revivify.
Yep.
I swear if you use this,
I was about to say, Revivify has such a short 1 minute. You have 1 minute to get to the creature and bring them back. If you don't, if someone uses this spell,
it doesn't work.
And it's a reaction to use, by the way.
Yeah.
If someone wants to do this, like, you can't stop them with a Revivify.
Nope. The only thing that could potentially... What level is it?
It's a 6th level spell.
Yeah.
Counterspell, but you'd have to cast it at a higher level, wouldn't you?
Or, well, the one benefit of Counterspell is even if you cast it at its normal level, you kind of get a sense at least whether the spell is a higher level or not, and you can roll to try and stop it.
Yeah, so you could counterspell it, but that means you also have to have someone who has counterspell who's not the person that's dead. So,
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a fun spell that I was excited to see in Xanathar's Guide.
So, I mean, just reading the rules there, as we're talking about, as they're written, would you rule that then, that they can do Revivify as they release it from the cage? Because it doesn't say either way what happened. It just says once the spell ends, it's released.
The key is, though, Revivify says you touch a creature that has died within the last minute.
Yeah, well, Revivify is about the body, not about the soul, right? This is just freeing the soul. So I think you'd still have to figure out how to get their body back?
So you either have to release the soul within that minute and still cast Revivify.
Ooh.
Well, I mean,
could
technically,
you
if they tap that 6 times, though, within that minute, I mean, that's 6 rounds. You have 10 rounds, technically.
But it's non-concentration, I believe.
No, I'm saying they have... Once they use the soul 6 times, it's released.
Right.
So if, let's say, they use 6... Like, the next 6 rounds, they use Steal Life to just regenerate health.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've used it and it's released.
Yes. Which does mean that you still have 4 rounds to Revivify.
Exactly.
But if the person is really, really evil, they're just not going to use any of the abilities.
No, they're going to run.
Or they could use a couple and then just, bank the rest for emergencies. Right?
Right.
So I guess that kind of brings us into talking about, well, how does resurrection work? Because, I mean, there's the resurrection spell, which is pretty great. So as long as they haven't been dead for a century, and they didn't die of old age, and they aren't undead, and they want to come back, you just resurrect them. And
well, this one's big on if the soul is free and willing.
Right. Yeah, which is up to, I guess, if it's a player character, they get to decide for their character. If it's the DM, you would decide. But they don't get any... Like, this is where they come back with penalties, because, coming back from the dead is not... It's not easy if you're just doing a resurrection.
I mean, especially if you've been dead for, less than a century, but more than a few days.
Which is a pretty big window, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And it does restore missing body parts. This has come up a couple times, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think it was in my game, it was in that whole Waterdeep separate piece where they were able to beat a high enough level cleric who was able to, or caster who was able to resurrect some people who had been missing body parts unrelated to how they died, but those limbs came back because that's how resurrection works. And you don't have any mortal wounds, but you do have those negatives to attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks, and you can
-4.
Yeah, and you get rid of that over time by taking long rests, but you're not yourself when you come back. And I think aside from the rules, there would definitely be some narrative consequences to being resurrected. Like in Buffy.
Well, there's also the issue to the caster. Like, if someone's been dead for more than a year, the caster cannot cast any spells and has disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws until they take a long rest as well.
Yeah, I think for a player character, most other player characters would, if they had access to the spell, use it to try to bring somebody back. Unless they really hated them. Which could happen. It'd be like, is it worth it? But ideally, you would get to have access to a true resurrection. That's
ideal.
It's like the same thing, but where you don't have any of the consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, resurrection, the one thing is the cost of it too. It takes an hour and 1,000 gold pieces, or a diamond worth 1,000 gold pieces.
Well, I'd say the main difference actually is that for resurrection, you have to have the body. Whereas a true resurrection, you just are like, I mean, you still have to touch the creature, but they can get an entirely new body if something has happened to the old one.
Yeah. You have a tooth of the creature.
Yeah, I will bring back their whole body from this tooth.
However, true resurrection is 25,000 gold pieces.
That's nothing.
How much is a life worth in D&D? 25,000 gold.
I have had this a few times with some players where we've had resurrection as an option for them. But if they died via ways that destroy the body. So acid, lava, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then, we'll just resurrect them. Like, you can't. You need the body.
Yeah. And you can't just say, I wish for them to be back.
you need the true resurrection. And sometimes I've had players kind of suddenly realise the spell they thought was going to be their saviour in this fight really couldn't. And we've had characters die because, like, well, yeah, they're gone now. You can't, you're in the middle of a dungeon, you can't go back and find a healer to give you true resurrection. You've got to deal with what you've got.
Right, yeah, you're down for the count right now. You're probably going to be somebody new. The one of the other spells we've talked about a lot, I've never used it, but I love the idea of it, is reincarnate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where you get a new body, but it's not the body you had. It's still one of the things where it has to be willing and call the soul to enter the body, but you could roll the D100 and just come back as a totally different race. Yeah. Which as certain characters, like, that would be pretty crazy if you've built a certain type of character based on their, like, racial bonuses, and all of a sudden you're not an elf, you're a dwarf.
I like this. I tend to have a few players who are kind of what I call min-maxers. Who actually go and sort of they get the right kind of synergy of their race and their class, which I understand. Fine.
That's me. Rachel's going Bethany at you because it's me.
And this I just not so once again. I'm a mean DM. I like the idea that they die and all they've got is reincarnation.
Yeah. I'm sorry. You could come back. You have like a 2% chance of coming back as the same race. And I guess you'd have to expand this for non-standard races, even if you want to make it a little crazier. You could come back as an Arakakra.
I like that.
Rachel would be down for that, wouldn't you, Rachel?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, I think also narratively, some characters are like super, it's really important to them where they come from. Like the character, my ultimate, like, min-max character was a drow, and if she came back as any other race, it would be a horrifying experience for her because she's a drow, and that's kind of central to her core identity, which I think would be a really fun experience and, like, interestingly narratively. Whereas I think, Rachel, for your character who's a Earth Genasi, if she suddenly came back as a halfling,
would she even notice?
I mean, she'd notice she's shorter, like, things would be higher up.
She would have hair, though.
Yeah, she would have hair because she's bald.
So that just actually made me think of it. Like, I need to, like, get some finger clippings or something to leave with Grendo in case I die and be like, go reincarnate.
Please go to the nearest temple and bring me back as something. Let's surprise me.
I don't care what.
Suddenly you're a dragonborn.
I'll be more beautiful, I promise.
So yeah, I think this is fun. I've never, like, had a situation where it made sense as a DM or as a player character for it to happen, but I like it a lot, and I think it's fun.
Yeah, I see.
You know, Josh, because it's actually an option under Wild Magic that you cast this on yourself, and if you die within 1 minute, it goes off.
Oh, yeah.
And Josh was always hoping that this would happen to him.
Because he was a Wild Magic sorcerer.
Yep.
Yeah. He was a tiefling, too, so he's like, my character would be okay with not being a tiefling anymore, because, you know, prejudice and all that. Like, you know, typical fantasy world stuff. But yeah, I think that's one of the only ways that you're brought back from the dead, and it could be different, and not like just a negative or a positive, but just sort of a neutral change.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of fun. We also, we had on here Raised Dead. We didn't even talk about that one.
Well, because it's different.
Yeah, but that's where you haven't been dead more than 10 days.
Right.
But it also brings you back as undead.
No, that would be animate dead. Raised dead is you have 10 days, and then you take a -4 to attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks.
Yeah, so it's sort of like the Revivify, Raised Dead, Resurrection, True Resurrection, or like, it's like a sliding scale of how good you are at bringing people back and how long it has been. And
well, for Raised Dead, it does not restore missing body parts.
Yeah, so if you've lost an arm, you've still lost an arm.
Yep.
So I'm trying to look at what we have left in our questions. I think we've talked about most of these. One of the things we haven't so much is alternate rules for player character deaths. And I know, Rachel, you've used some of that in Lost Minds.
Yep, Lost Minds of Phandelver. So, okay. Because that's a shorter one, I told my players up front, its only levels 1 to 5. And, you get attached to a character pretty fast. So I was like, if you, instead of dying, you have the option of you can die and make a new character, or you basically fall into a coma for 1d4 days, and then, you and I will talk off screen about what happens to your character and what kind of penalties they come back with. And I made it clear up front that they're not going to be, like, huge altering penalties. Like, I'm not going to, like, kill half your stats or something like that. It was going to be more like flavorful. So
flavorful.
Tasty. So it came up because, of course, Lost Mines of Phandelver is brutal in the beginning. And they were attacked by, and this is the time I was nice. I had, technically it should have been a TPK. But I basically had the bugbears call off the wolves because they were their pet wolves, and they all headed back because they are bugbears. They're not very smart. And I was like, they're just going to assume you're dead, even though so there's, 4 players? I can't remember if I had 4 or 5 players, but basically whatever I had -1 because 1 was a pacifist. So she didn't do any damage. She was the healer, but she also didn't attack. But yeah, they were all unconscious except 1 player was dead. Outright dead. I'm like, well, we will discuss your options. He chose to come back with like a form of PTSD that he was basically, if he took massive damage, he had to make, I think it was a wisdom save or whatever, basically to avoid becoming feared. And then anytime he saw bugbears, because that's what killed him by basically caving in his face with its club, he also had to make a saving throw to avoid fear. So basically, he just, like, would randomly take a bunch of damage and go, panic, and just drop to the ground in fear and have to start making some saves. It worked out a couple times that he, like, I think one time he failed. So he was feared for 1 round, but then the next round he, like, got his stuff together and, jumped back into the fight. But it was fun. His other option was being horribly disfigured and taking penalties to his persuasion.
Oh, because his face got caved in.
But he got a bonus to his intimidation because he looked terrifying. And also, he didn't know this, but there was also a random chance upon first meeting people that I had to make a saving throw to avoid them being feared of him.
Because he was so scary.
Because he was so terrifying, because his face was caved in on one side.
Oh, gosh.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah. Gosh, that's brutal. You could have just let them die, but no.
It was a lot of fun. They liked it.
Okay, so I think the last thing we had on our little anecdotes was you, Rachel, talking about playing with the kids that you work with.
Yeah.
The kids.
So, death. Okay, before we even started playing, they were asking about dying. Like, before they even got into a combat, like, I think they were still in the process of making their characters, and they were asking me about death. And it was very hard to convey to 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds that when your character is knocked unconscious and at 0 hit points, you are not dead, you are dying. And there is a difference between dying and dead. And then they all went into a panic about, well, how do I not die? It was very frustrating because we hadn't even started fighting or doing anything yet. And they were like, okay, so I only have 9 hit points. How do I not die? I was like, don't worry about it. Like, we'll get to there. If that bridge comes up, we will cross it. And of course, then the first fight, there was like 3 of them unconscious, but that was besides the point. It was planned. They were all to be knocked unconscious and taken hostage. They just didn't know that, and so they were all freaking out because they thought I was trying to kill them immediately. But it was more of a way to introduce the rules of dying and all that good stuff.
I think the biggest thing I've learned is that every DM has a different way of approaching it, even if we use the same rules. And I think that's largely driven by what's the right experience for your players.
Yes.
I think I would echo that a lot, that it's about what the players, I've talked about being a mean DM, it's about what the players expect from the campaign and want to play.
Right.
If it's a really, something like Critical Role, where it's really character driven, probably aren't going to kill characters. You probably aren't going to actually kill somebody because they've invested 10 levels in that character's story. If you're more combat focused, then maybe deaths are more on the cards. But I think as long as the players understand through talking to them, through the world they're living in, through the role play that happens around them, they understand the stakes and what's likely to happen. I think you can kind of play it any way you like.
Yeah, and I think as we've kind of talked a lot, all of us as DMs want it to mean something and not just be a random occurrence. That can happen, but that's not the first choice, right?
Yes.
But overall, I think as a DM, I've been DMing for, is it like 3 years now? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
I feel like that moment is going to come where a PC dies and I'm going to be probably equally upset. Like, just as much as the player is, but I'm bound to stick to it and follow the rules and see where it leads the story. And I think it's not likely that I'm going to have a TPK, given my party is level 14, but it is getting increasingly likely that one of them might die. And I'm just like, if it happens, it happens. It's going to be tough. Hearts are going to be broken, but, we'll all get through this together.
Yep.
Like, I don't know. It's kind of intense, but I think that's part of the reason we play the game, right? Is for it to feel like a real experience, even though it's a fantasy world.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
Agreed.
Well, thank you again for joining us today, Rob. And before we end the episode, just wanted to ask you a few questions. First, how'd you get into tabletop role-playing games?
It's a long-ish story. I've been playing D&D 15 years, but the story goes a little bit deeper than that. When I was 14, so 20 years ago now, 14, 15, I got into playing Warhammer. So Warhammer 40k, and Blood Bowl and all that kind of stuff. This is the mid-90s now. So I got into playing those, and I got into playing Magic the Gathering cards. But being a teenager, I didn't have a lot of money, and those are expensive games to play.
Oh, indeed.
And so as I kind of reached 18, I went to university. I still had them, but I didn't really play them much. But you kind of fall in with the same kind of people who play them. And I started playing the Legend of the Five Rings card game. With some friends, not the current version that's out, but like the previous version that was much more along the Magic the Gathering kind of bent. And one day, my guys was playing, was like, Rob, I'm starting a Thursday night D&D game. Do you want to play? I was like, sure, not really having a clue what this was. And I went along, and we literally played. I mean, this is in a dorm room, as you guys would call it in America, my friends, and there's literally a bed and a desk. And so we're sitting on floors, we're sitting on the bed, we're sitting on his desk to play. There's 4 of us playing, including the DM. And we ran through a couple of campaigns. It was version 3.5 back then. And we played through 2 campaigns. Then we all left university and we kind of stopped playing for a little bit. I had a job that sent me travelling around the world. I didn't really play for a couple of years. But then when I came back to the UK and I sort of settled in one place, I thought, well, I really miss doing that. I really miss playing those games. The guys who I play with are now spread to the winds. So I went and found a local group and just started playing with them. And then I've been playing on and off for sort of the last 6 years, predominantly DMing. It's a little known secret. I've never actually played 5th edition. Because the group I play with, none of them really want to DM, and I love DMing. So I have DM'd 5e for a couple of years now, but I've never actually played it. So, I just ran games. We changed systems. We played a bit of GURPS. We played a bit of Fate. We played a bit of the Dresden Files. A bit of Feng Shui for a little bit. That's Feng Shui it's called. And a few other things here and there. But yeah, kept coming back to 5th edition as my sort of my stored. And that's led me here now. And I now run 2 in-person games and 4 online games.
Wow. 4 online games? Oh my gosh. I feel like such a slacker now. I'm like, I'm DMing 1 game.
I mean, I
have a young daughter, so I don't sleep a lot. And gives me a lot of time to plan things.
Wow. Well, you're definitely, you're very qualified to be here, and I'm now realizing we're not qualified enough to have this podcast.
I was thinking too, like, oh gosh, I was DMing like the Out of the Abyss campaign, and then I started the podcast, and I was like, okay, this is like getting to be, maybe I can DM 1 more, but doing 4 online and 2 face-to-faces.
They aren't weekly, so
the addiction is real.
Oh yes.
I understand it.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of where I got to where I am now.
Very cool. Well, having played so many systems, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, it's 5e.
Okay.
Dungeons and Dragons obviously is the sort of the Goliath in the room when it comes to these systems, and I started on 3.5, which I enjoyed. Then 4 was the big one, and I think 4 gets a lot of short shrift from people, and people aren't very keen on 4. But I've got a lot of time for 4th edition. A lot of my players came up through 4th, and whilst it isn't what a lot of people consider Dungeons and Dragons, it's a good fun game. And it's a great one for getting newbies badly into. But I think 5th has kind of brought those things together. I did like playing Feng Shui. That's another one that not a lot of people played. It's quite an insane system. In that it's designed to be over the top, sort of martial arts, Hong Kong Fooey kind of action films. I played a character called Sister Michelle Rodriguez, who is a futuristic nun who drives a Dodge Impala who'd been sent back after mecha gorillas had killed her entire orphanage, and she wielded like a submachine gun. So it is very much in that wheelhouse of play. One of the feats you get is you get a bag of guns, and every time you run out of it's quicker to drop your gun and pull another gun than reload. And all that sort of thing. It's meant to be, you jump off a building and shoot 2 helicopters on the way down. It's silly fun, but it is a lot of fun.
That sounds insane.
Yeah.
So,
I now want to try this.
Yeah, right?
I always feel the need to advocate for Feng Shui, because I think it's one of the ones people don't know about. Everyone understands about 5e, everyone knows about Dungeons and Dragons. But Feng Shui it's a good. You've got to get the right group. You have to have people who are kind of willing to buy into it. It isn't a heartfelt, serious, story-driven.
You're not like,
it is.
You don't want a big narrative arc for your character. You're just like, I would like to kill things ridiculously.
Yeah.
It's a little campy sounding.
It's very campy. In my first session, one of our players, we were rescuing somebody, and he literally used their body as a battering ram.
Yes.
Bounce off it. But it's that kind of silly driving off buildings, leaping through the air kind of game.
Oh my god.
Sounds like a good Saturday to me.
Wow.
Yeah, Rachel's like, I'm in. I'm sold. When does this
Where do I
happen?
sign up? Got any openings?
Yep, let's do this. I'm ready. Let's go.
I can't take on another game, I'm sorry.
I'm kidding.
You're right.
You sound like you're beyond capacity.
Yeah.
Like, I'm tapped
gosh.
out, man. I'm tapped out.
Well, with a game like that, what? Gosh, this next question is just, what would be your what's your favorite memory or moment that you've had as either a DM or a player?
I'm going to cheat and do 2 here.
Go for it.
We'll
One
allow
that's
it.
from my very first campaign. And it's the moment that really opened up to me what these games could be. And it was basically, we discovered I was playing a wizard, and we discovered that under the city we were living in, there was a cult trying to blow it up. And they were collecting these two ingredients to mix together to blow up the city. And the DM had designed this long arc, for us to kind of infiltrate our way through the, collective and sort of, interfere with their plans. But it was decided that a simpler solution was to literally mage hand one handful of this chemical into the other one, which triggered the explosion and wiped out the entire cult at level 1. And it destroyed the entire DM campaign. But for someone who grew up on video games, especially in the 90s, which were very, very direct, it was something like, there isn't a next step. I can do anything I want here. if I can think of it and, the DM lets me roll it, I can do anything. And that moment sort of really stands out to me as one of those oh, okay, we are the masters of this destiny a little bit. The other one was my greatest triumph, I think, as a DM. I actually took a whole campaign from level 1 to level 10, all the way through in person, which was a rarity for me. And the big reveal at the end was that their mentor through the entire thing had been the bad guy. He'd sent them back in time at some point to rescue some dwarven artifacts to bring back to him. And all through the campaign, they've been finding the dead bodies of various people that kind of look like them, not them, but kind of look like them. So you'd have a tiefling warlock. They find the body of that, and you're like, well, that's strange. And it turned out that basically the bad guy had been doing this over and over again. Whoa. So when one party failed, he went back in time, changed something in their history, like killing their parents or adopting them, all that kind of stuff, to form them into the people who could finally do this mission for him. And the big end was that them having to defeat his now demonic form. But just like the idea of sprinkling through over like a couple of years, these little hints of, well, here's a body of you, and this guy had been the one, all your backstories where your parents were killed, or you were dropped off at the orphanage, all these things, it was all him, and he kind of went through. So that, for me, kind of having that texture run through the entire campaign was a big triumph for me, and none of them got it, none of them twigged it was coming, and they won, and I only killed one of them in the last fight.
That's a reasonable, acceptable number of characters, I'd say. Yeah.
One death and you still beat the big bad. That's good.
Some of them had died along the way, but in the last fight, only one went down.
And how much do they hate that guy? Like, it sounds like
quite a lot. They had to fight through like a whole war zone to get these, and rob a bank to get these items, and so they returned to the modern time almost like triumphant heroes. They kind of swaggered into into their meeting with their mentor. Like, yeah, we've done everything you want. Here's your items. Really happy. And he gave them a couple of $1,000 gold as he promised he would. And they're all off celebrating and not noticing that he's opening the boxes and getting out these items and putting on all the rings. And then I threw this massive fight at them, and I built like a large, stadium for them to fight in. And we tend to do theatre of the mind stuff in that campaign. Mm-hmm. So to break out a 2-foot square battle grid with wood effects and stone effects and all that kind of stuff, it was a nice big end to the campaign.
It felt suitably epic. It sounds like
it did, and that's what I was shooting for.
Not like Inns of Princes.
Oh yeah. So I'm running. I don't know if I mentioned you before, Rob. I'm running Princes of the Apocalypse, by which I mean, first time DMing, I was like, I'll run a module. Princes of the Apocalypse looks good. I'll run that. And realized pretty early on that overall the players hated 90% of the actual events in there because there's no meaning behind them. Things just happen and are. So they pretty much have gotten to the end of the Princess module. Like, they beat the Prince of Elemental Evil, of Elemental Fire, particularly this time, because you only fight one. And they're all like, really? That's it? I'm like, yeah, I ran that encounter exactly, like, pretty much how it's supposed to be in the book. And they're like, I mean, really? Seriously? For level 14? Like, that's it? We could do so much worse. So now they found out who they're really fighting, and they're much happier, by which I mean they're much angrier, which is cool.
Yep.
I think that's a strange thing. That one of the things I like all the role-playing games is that if you make it easy for the person to win, they don't like that. No, they're like, that. I mean, okay, all of this for nothing? Yeah. Like, although every other game, video games, ball games, winning is the goal. It's like, winning is not the goal here. Like, people want to win, but it isn't the case of just winning easily is not the joy. The joy is either a hard fight or winning cleverly. Well,
you want to earn it.
Yeah, yes. I think that's the hard part about being a DM is you have to make sure the party is capable of winning, but only winning in like the right kind of way that feels right. Otherwise, if you just say, and then he dies because you stabbed him so well, they're like, oh, I mean, that's cool, I guess. Like, yeah. You don't want it to be underwhelming. Like, some fights can be underwhelming, and that can be part of the narrative, but when you build up to there's this big evil thing that's been behind it all along, like, it needs
and
to...
it's very unenthusiastic, and it's like, oh, that's it?
Yeah, it's just a random evil monster. It doesn't mean anything narratively to the party. It doesn't feel suitably, I don't know, overwhelmingly, diabolically evil, like a massive threat to the world. If they're a high-level party, they're like, I mean, we probably have better stuff we could have been doing with our time, because, we're kind of like epic heroes, so...
We're kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
We are the heroes of Red Larch, come on.
Seriously, come on.
So, yeah, it's definitely a challenge as a DM, but when you get there, like it sounds like you did with this one, it feels really great when you've delivered the opportunity for the players to have that experience that they want.
Yeah, I think that's it. About trying to balance level, and it's one thing I think I've really struggled with 5e recently, getting back into it after my daughter was born, was that balancing of the fights. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously this isn't what the podcast is about, but like the method for developing levels of fights is tricky in 5e, and you want to find it like hard for them, but not so hard. You don't want to wipe people out too easily, and getting that level right and making it mean something, especially when you've got a bit more, shall we say, murder hobo style players.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd have to say, like, early on, I definitely treated it more as like a science. Like, okay, if I crunch the numbers right and I follow the rules, I'll make an encounter that fits. And I learned that's not really... Yeah.
Nope. Well, one of my best examples was running out of the abyss. They fight 2 demon lords in particular, and you went up against Weeblex, demon lord of oozes, and I left him as the stat block CR23, and you killed him with no problem.
It was like 2.5 rounds, like, and afterwards
level 14.
We're like, so really, like, is he coming back? Like, what's round 2?
That was it. That's all. And I was just like, okay, cool. Now I know when you guys fight the final big bad, which Demogorgon, they get a hint of him early on and see him like toss boats onto a shore and all this. They're like, okay, we run away now. Mm-hmm. So when they go to fight him, it feels like that was great. It felt much more epic. And I just left him as it was rather than like weaken him or anything like that. And it felt, at least to me, it felt like you guys earned this win.
Yeah, it was really tough. I thought my character was going to die. It was really like touch and go a few times, which is perfect, right? Where you feel like you could die, but somehow by teamwork and heart, you pull through. Like, it's kind of like the ending of a superhero movie sometimes.
Well, I think just tying a bit more to this week's theme, I think one thing I always try and do is if it isn't the big bad guy fight. So, before we hit the big bad guy, I often throw in like a random encounter, shall we say. So, that they get into a fight in a bar like that. And I always try in that fight to kill somebody. Get them to 0 hit points, but not kill them, but just get them unconscious. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think it always helps to remind the players that, yes, you are conquering heroes of level 20, but you can still be taken out. Mm-hmm. And always I find makes the last fight, even when it's easy, people are fresh in their mind thinking, well, actually, in that last fight against 2 guys in a bar, I went down. And I think that helps to kind of instill more fear in your players. And that's what, as a DM, I'm always after, is fear.
Let's be honest.
You want them to be afraid of anything that happen, but still willing to adventure.
Yeah, fear and power, basically. That's what DMing is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, Bethany, you even mentioned to me at one point, like, if in any sort of, like, even, like, not like a major mini-boss or boss fight, if you can get one of us to 0 or make it like that threat real, yeah, it's a good fight.
Yeah, that's where I feel good about it. In a party of 6, if at least one person is knocked to 0 and is making death saves, like, that was probably adequately challenging. I can feel okay about that. Like,
yeah,
I agree.
Thank you, Rob, for joining us so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, we enjoyed having you.
It's been a real joy to be on the show, so thanks for having me.
Anytime, and this was a blast. And to everyone listening, don't forget to check out Rob's podcast, Loremasters.